Have you ever done the 10-test business assessment on your property business? My name is Ritchie Clapson. I'm a chartered structural engineer and I've been involved in the property industry now over 40 years. And in this episode, I'm going to tell you why you should, and equally I'm going to explain what the 10-test business assessment is for your property business. Okay, welcome to today's episode. Let's talk about this 10-test business assessment. What's it about? Well, this is going to focus on perhaps any business out there, but equally I think it's really important for your property business. Now here at propertyCEO, we specialize in mentoring and guiding and training people in property development. So what I'm going to do today in this episode, I'm going to use the example of property development and maybe compare it to perhaps buy to let as two alternative property business strategies during my 10-test assessment. And I'm going to take you through each of those tests and in no particular order. They're all important. Should we start with number one? And again, as always, I always say, grab a piece of paper, write these things down. You could learn a lot from these. Test number one. Rock solid product demand. So, check your business out. Has your business got rock solid product demand? Well, let's have a think about that. If you've got a buy to let, yeah, you probably have. There's a huge demand for rental properties in the UK. So that's pretty strong. You could give that box a tick. Let me extend that though. Maybe we'll extend it. Let's talk about property businesses, HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. What about that? Has that got rock solid product demand? Not so sure. What do you think? I'm thinking here, quite a few places in the country, there is saturation in that marketplace. So maybe it's not rock solid. And equally, have a think about that particular property business model. What if you've got a position where you've got an HMO here, you've just opened it up, and 2 years later, someone's opened up an HMO down the road. Fresh, brand new HMO. Of course, HMO is generally more transient people, more short-term lets. Do you think people are perhaps going to be attracted down here? Do you think you might have to freshen yours up? What if actually 3 or 4 people put HMOs all within that same street? Or even more within that town, within that city? Is there going to be saturation? There often could be. So think about that. Yes, you might have rock solid product demand to start with, but could that be wiped out? Most certainly could. Now let's think about property development, because I think that has got rock solid product demand, particularly the fact that we're supposed to build 1.5 million homes in this country over the duration of the current government, which is circa 300,000 homes a year, and we fall short by at least half of that. So what does that tell you? There's 150,000 customers that want to buy the product being a home, every year across the country. And in fact, if we're falling short every year, it's not just 150 because we fell short last year. So where's those 150? Well, they're on top of this year, so that's 300. And what about the year before? 450, 600. There are hundreds of thousands of people that want to buy a home that can't. So even if you develop here, and I develop there, and a friend of yours develops over here, all within the same city, within the same road, provided we fundamentally check that there's demand in that city, and I grant you occasionally, maybe certain cities don't need so much, but I'll be honest with you, most of this country, most of our towns, most of our cities are looking at a shortage of homes. In which case, provided you understand that in the duration of you buying and developing and delivering that product, and don't forget development is quite often a simple exit. You know, we're going to build it, we're going to sell it, we're going to put the cash straight in our pocket. So your vulnerability on the rock solid demand is very limited. So provided you assess that marketplace at day one, it's likely to be able to be exited. And the fact that someone else could be building here or here is unlikely to affect you. Let's have a look at number 2 in our 10 business assessment. Lack of competition. Well, I can go back in the same way. I can look at our HMOs. HMOs, buy-to-lets. Okay, buy-to-lets again, probably not a problem. HMOs, because HMO service departments make a lot more money. Maybe we compare service departments. Lack of competition. Well, you open a service department, how certain are you going to be that the competition isn't going to come in and take over? How certain are you that someone else isn't going to come in and open a service department block better than yours, all singing, all dancing for yours, and indeed undercut you in your area? So what about the competition? Are you vulnerable? You almost certainly are. What if you're actually just doing holiday lets? But locally there's a new holiday park that opens up, or locally there's a new hotel. What if you're just doing work lets, business lets? What if a hotel does special deals? Competition is constantly going to be there. What about if you do development? Well, it's not, is it? Because actually we're talking about that demand. If the demand is there, the competition's unlikely to be there, provided you pitch your prices at the right place. So you know that your product is the right price in the right marketplace and you stack your numbers on that, you're going to sell it. So actually, if you build here, someone else builds there, and I build over there, is it competition? We can all build because the demand is huge. Number 3 in my test is managing cash flow. Now, cash is king. Have you heard that phrase? I bet you have, haven't you? Cash is absolutely king. And one of the biggest problems of so many successful businesses is they fall over through a lack of cash flow. And even the most profitable businesses fall over through a lack of cash flow. Cash is important to come in and out of your business. Now, a lot of the business models can struggle. Buy-to-let, HMO, service department, just comparing, as I say, property business models, all of those require cash. What if your tenant in your buy-to-let property has gone? What if they trash the place as they leave? What if they pinched all the white goods? Now, what happens? You still got your mortgage to pay for a month, 2 months, 3 months whilst that's sorting out. You've got to spend money reinvesting in that property to get it up and running. Is that going to hurt your cash flow? Almost certainly it is. What if your HMOs have voids? Again, what if your service departments have voids? All of that is cash flow requirements. All of that needs to be sorted. What if your tenants don't pay? What if your tenants have an issue? Of course, can you get them out these days? Well, legislation says generally not. Even if your tenant doesn't pay, you can't just kick them out and get another tenant back in. So it could all affect your cash flow. All of those other property, general, straightforward property business models have a cash flow implication. Property development, yes, you've got to monitor your cash flow. Of course you have. Does it have cash flow implications? Yes. But run properly, no, it doesn't. Because actually, when we're doing a property development, we're funding the majority of the business model. Most of the funding comes from one source, a specialist development funder. We bring our deposit, our private investors' deposit up front. We've got a nominal bit of cost to get the project going, and everything else is paid down. And the contractor is paid in arrears. That's how the development model works. So the contractor does some work, you draw it down from the bank, you pay the contractor. The consultants do some work, you draw it down from the bank, you pay the consultants. And the interest rates are all rolled up. So there's no monthly interest rates. So from a cash flow point of view, it can work quite well as a business model. So that is number 3. So let's go number 4, higher margins. Now this is important. And let me go back to the straightforward buy-to-let business model, because that business model has really tight margins, certainly for most people when they get into their property journey. Imagine the average buy-to-let with an average deposit of £50,000 to £70,000 in this country. After you paid the mortgage, because you're only putting in circa 25% deposit, is about £300 to £400 a month. Not particularly life-changing, is it? But from a margins point of view, that's not a lot of money. Now, let's just think, what could wipe out your profit? What about a broken boiler? How much is a boiler these days? I don't know, £1,000, £2,000? Well, there you are, several months profit gone. What about if there's a void? Several months profit gone. What about if the tenant trashes something? Several months profit gone. You can see that model and the margins are so tight, you don't need much to go wrong when you actually turn around and you've now got a financial problem. Property development, we're talking about a 20% margin minimum. We're looking at a 20% profit on gross development value. And provided we start with a solid 20% profit at the start of our deal, there's a long way to get wiped out. Think about it. To wipe out the entire amount of that profit, the property resale market would have to crash by 20%. Have you ever seen it crash by 20%? Certainly not in my lifetime. And even if it did, well, you're at break even. And at worst, you refinance and hold, rent the properties out. I know it's got a bit more vulnerability, but rent them out, wait for the market to climb. Because if the resale market crashes, where's the rental market go? It goes up, doesn't it? So ultimately, you're in a position where you've got another exit. What about construction costs? A lot of people think about that. Well, typically construction costs don't equate for a huge amount of the project overall. There's a lot of other projects, including the basic purchase. But let's say we're going to talk about a project, just to give you a bit of an example. A project that could yield you, again, let's say £200,000 profit. Typically, something like that might have construction costs all in, let's say £250,000. Could be more, could be less. But let's choose that because I'm just relating to an example that I can think of in my head. Now, typically, that would be split half labour, half materials, £125,000. Now, normally, both those things don't go up at once. But let's say materials went up. Let's say materials doubled. And the reality is not all materials go up. Sometimes it's blockwork, sometimes it's plaster. So it does vary. Sometimes it's timber. But let's say all the materials doubled. Now, that's unforeseen, or unheard of. £125,000 extra. We've already got £200,000 profit. So we'd actually reduce our profit to £75,000. So that high margin gives us that buffer. And we're not even thinking about today 10% contingency that we build into the deal. And before you say it, what if the resale market drops and the prices go up? Those things don't normally happen at the same time. So property development in my test has much higher margins. Multiple exits, that's number 5 on my list. Now, let's say you've got to go back to HMOs. You've got a simple HMO. It's an HMO, isn't it? It's a house of multiple occupation. Okay, we could go professional lets. We could go, sort of not professional lets. But I mean, that's what it is. It is what it is. Can we suddenly change it? Not really. If it's an HMO all with en suites, we can't suddenly turn it back to residential, not without a lot of cost. Of course, property development, as we've just said, has 2 exits. In fact, often it has 3 exits. If you buy the building and the deal doesn't quite work out and the market suddenly changes, maybe if you're buying an existing building, commercial building and converting it, keep it commercial. Split it up into small commercial units. There's 1 exit. Of course, if you do develop it out and whilst developing it, the resale market crashes, refinance and hold it for rent. Rent, sell, 2 exits. Number 6 in my test. If you're in a business and you want to test your business model, think about the control that other people have over your business. The less people that have control over your business, the better. The more successful you're going to be as an entrepreneur. I can tell you that after being around in industry, in business for over 40 years. And for me, the last thing I want is someone else telling me what to do. I'm talking about legislation. What's the government like in legislation in property? Are you a landlord at the moment out there? Oh, if you are, I feel so sorry for you. Because what are the government doing? They're throwing more and more and more. And of course, there's probably more legislation coming your way. They're tying you up in knots. They're controlling you. Your tenant's not paying, but you can't get rid of them because the government says no. The tenants trashed your property. They've walked off with all the white goods, but you can't sue them. The government says no. I mean, it is getting a bit like that, isn't it? So the government is controlling your business. Whereas actually in property development, if I compare, this is why I like property development in my 10 business assessment test, is that actually the government are helping. The government are actually helping property developers. They're penalising landlords, one could argue, but they're helping, on the other hand, property developers. They're actually giving us legislation to help us. They're giving us things like permitted development rights. They're encouraging us to develop. Why? Because the government need homes. The government need more homes than they do landlords, because that's all part of the government's manifesto in delivering homes. They're going to be judged on that for re-election day. So they're going to give us less legislation as developers, nearly always. Number 7, taxation. Goes hand in hand with legislation if you're a buy-to-let landlord, doesn't it? What's the taxation like, my friends out there right now? Is it good? Is it bad? What's it been getting like? I mean, it's just getting worse, isn't it? It's getting worse. Wherever they can, the government will tax you. And that's probably the same in buy-to-let, HMOs and service departments. If it's not right now, it's coming your way, unfortunately. A lot of taxation. Why? Because, you probably won't vote any different. You're probably not going to change. In fact, the majority of the population would love that if landlords get taxed. What are we doing here as a business in development? Well, actually, we've got less taxation because we're running it as an SME, a small, medium enterprise. We're actually getting taxed as a corporation tax, as a business, 25% max. But actually, putting a structure together, we can move money tax efficiently in and around our business into other businesses that we start, other developments. So actually, property development is very efficient from a tax point of view. Far more efficient than your buy-to-let HMO service department model. And what about number 8? This is my test. Is funding available? Can you get money to do what you want to do? Because most entrepreneurs are out there trying to make money. Most entrepreneurs often start with not a lot of money, or what they have got, they're trying to turn into even more money. That's the entrepreneurial path. So is funding readily available? Well, it definitely is across most property models, because most property models yield big and sensible returns. So people like investing in property. But actually, right now, at the time of filming, 2025, there is a lot more appetite for what is called short-term funding. Just a few months ago, I was speaking to a number of very high-level financial brokers that work in the property space within this country, within the UK. And they said towards the end of 2024 and into 2025, there was a large appetite and a large shift towards a lot of funders wanting to invest in short-term money. Short-term money typically being 1 or 2 years in and out. Now, that's not to say the money isn't there for buy-to-lets and HMOs and service apartments. Don't get me wrong, it is. But what they're saying is because of the vulnerability of interest rates up and down, people were very keen, or people, I'm saying investors, big institutional investors, big high net worth individuals, were very keen to get into funding models which were relatively quick in and out, quick in and out. It left them less exposed. The property development model is a short-term funding model. And from what I hear, that's where the appetite is right now. Number 9. Well, it goes back to what I was saying before, government support. It really ties up with legislation and taxation, but sometimes it can be quite separate. Is the government encouraging? Is the government supporting what you want to do in your business? And this is really across any business that I would always apply this test to. Is this a flavor? Is this something people are encouraging or discouraging? Now, outside of the property arena, there are lots of businesses that the government are encouraging. But if we just stick within our property space today, which is the space that we work in, which is the business model that is encouraged the most? Well, it's housing. It's the deliver of housing, deliver of new homes. The government is not championing and targeting and encouraging buy-to-let landlords. It's not encouraging HMOs. It's not encouraging serviced apartments. One could argue it's discouraging, but let's forget the discouraging. It's just not encouraging those business models. But it is encouraging property development because it is a major, if I was cynical, manifesto item which they have to deliver on, and if they don't deliver, they won't get their jobs back. That's just been a bit cynical, I guess. But it actually is a major driver to the economy. It's been known for years that the housing market, the new housing market, and the number of homes that get delivered in this country is directly related to the performance in the economy. Economic growth, economic sustainability is a key measure for any government. Those two things, housing and economic growth are intrinsically linked. So the government generally, whatever government we're talking about, are normally always supporting homes and houses. Do they support the buy-to-lets, the HMO service apartments? Probably not. So part of my 10 test assessment is to work in a space where the government wants to encourage and support you. It just means the journey is going to be easier. And number 10 of my 10 assessment list for businesses. And I think any business needs to be tested for this. And I think this is the most important. Number 10 is time. Time that you need to put into your business. Because what is it you're trying to do? What is it you want? There is things that are important in life. Money, yeah, okay. Money doesn't make you happy. A lack of it can make you quite sad. I get that, okay. But actually there's a point. There's a point when you earn enough money, you make enough money, you have enough money that your needs are met. You've got what you want. But actually what you then need is time. And when I look at property models, as far as I'm concerned, where my interest is, models that are not what I would call noisy or too noisy. Have a think about a buy-to-let. Let me explain. Relatively quiet, but a bit of noise because we have a tenant. And tenants, well, they give you trouble, don't they? Have you ever been a tenant yourself? Maybe you were a troublesome tenant, but they're always got a bit of trouble. So there's a little bit of noise. What about HMO? Well, an HMO is a house of multiple occupation. Multiple. I've now got several tenants, maybe 6 or more. 6 or more tenants is definitely 6 times the noise, but actually it's more than that because I've got 6 tenants living in one house. That means they've all got to get on. And do they? Well, most of the time, probably not. So that business is definitely noisier. Of course, noisier means it's more time. And now let's think of serviced apartments. Well, now I might have, let's say I've got 6 serviced apartments. And in fact, I've got guests constantly coming and going. Now, even if they're long-term guests staying a week at a time, they are constantly circulating. And so now what I've got more tenants, albeit them guests, which are circulating on a more regular basis, all having to get on because they all interact in some reaction in a way, even if it's just communal space. I've got a whole load more processes. I've got a noisier business. So buy-to-let, HMO, serviced apartments are quite noisy, and they all require time. Now, how much time? It depends how much you systemize that business. But actually, even if you systemize it, I often speak to people who have systemized the business. They've got management companies, and those management companies then let them down. So now they have to dive back in and sort stuff out themselves. Let's think about property development. It is probably the most leveraged business property model there is. You actually get someone else to do everything for you. You actually get a project manager to run the project. The project manager runs the design team. The project manager runs the contractor. The contractor runs the subcontractor. Do you know, many of my students who are based overseas are running their projects, turning up in the UK just 1 day a month. A couple of phone calls, virtual meetings in between. How is that from a time point of view? And actually, when we consider the higher margins, what do you want? What's better? Do you want a business model that's got a high margin, a 6-figure sum, for say 1 day a week? Or do you want a noisy business model that might earn you £300, £400, maybe £1,000, maybe £1,500, maybe £2,000 a month, but it's noisy? Your choice. Have a think though. Hopefully you've written those down, but if not, maybe re-listen to this and write those 10 things down. That is my 10 test assessment for businesses. And I think any business you're doing, you should always test it and then make your mind up. Is this a space I want to be in? Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Hopefully you will now go away and do that 10 test assessment on your business. Like and subscribe as always, and we'll see you in the next episode.